Hi, I am Michael Shanti here with my special guest, Rinaldo Brutoco, the President and CEO of the World Business Academy. And tonight we're going to talk about the end of the devil, or otherwise the imminent closure of Diablo Canyon. So Rinaldo, it's great to meet up with you again.
And Michael, nice to see you again.
Thank you.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. I heard the news that they're starting the process of closing Diablo Canyon, and I recall that it was an issue that was a big issue with you guys here at the Academy, so I thought it'd be nice to talk to you about it and get some insights on your involvement and how this came about.
Sure. Well, it came about because of really a very long-standing relationship I've had with Gavin Newsom. It goes back probably 30 years or more. When I heard that he was on the State Lands Commission, when I looked at that, and we knew that the State Lands Commission had a unique authority in this case because Diablo Canyon, like nuclear power plants everywhere, is heavily protected by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The NRC blocks every citizen group. They block local state regulation. They block local police regulation. They completely block everything to protect nuclear. Mm-hmm. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is probably the most corrupt federal agency in government today. And it's obviously not their fault because the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has a dual mandate. They are supposed to promote and regulate. Well, whenever you're supposed to promote, sell something, and regulate it, promote wins, regulate loses.
Yeah, conflict of interest, I think, applies.
Inherent conflict of interest. And so the industry, when it got that language passed in the first place, decided to take over, and it has. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has never seen or heard of a nuclear power plant it doesn't like. It wants every plant it can get built. It doesn't care what the risks are. It's completely, it's an industry spokesperson. It's like it is the nuclear industry. Which are a small handful of companies that are very large companies, mostly not American companies, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Who get phenomenal, tens of billions of dollars and then some. Plus, who have a complete and total exemption for catastrophic damages. So they don't even care if they blow up because the company that blew them up won't even pay.
Right. So now the point, you just mentioned the thing about the billions of dollars that they collect. How much of that comes in the form of taxpayer subsidy?
Well, it comes in all kinds of ways because the entire industry is 100% paid for by the public. So when you say subsidy, the ultimate subsidy is you never will pay a bill. In fact, if you get licensed to build a nuclear power plant, not only do you get all your money back, plus your capital, plus a guaranteed profit, and then some.
Right, because people will be buying that energy for years.
And they got no choice. So you're locked in from the day you get the magic wand. Now, there's some things that can go wrong, and I'll talk about those in a second. But basically, you've been given a 100% blanket entitlement to make money at the public's expense.
Right. So it's a juicy gig if you can get it.
It's the ultimate juicy. It's the insider's game. This is what people pay lobbyists and lawyers gazillions of dollars. Right. And in fact, in the nuclear industry, I am the only lawyer I know who is regarded as an attorney who deals in nuclear matters that doesn't work for the industry, one way or the other. Like when the Bar Association, the American Bar Association, came looking for a lawyer to talk about the downsides of nuclear, I was the only one they could dig up.
Well, at least you got a guaranteed market for that gig, huh?
Well, yeah, but no. I mean, the reason is because I don't charge. If I was a regular lawyer who had to make a living being a lawyer,
right,
I'd be on the other side of the fence theoretically because that's where I would charge. Now, in my case, I wouldn't because I find that morally reprehensible.
Yeah, but that's where the money would be.
That's where all the money is. And
right.
so, it's just to me, it's anyway. So here's what happens. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as I started to say, protects these plants. They keep open at all costs. They keep relicensing even though they know they're not safe. They hide from the public all kinds of extremely important information that literally is deadly.
Right.
And their feeling is the reason they do it is because, well, cars kill people, nuclear plants kill people, so what? You're not going to stop driving cars. To which I've said to many nuclear guys over the years, that's a bad analogy. Because if you look at what the Highway Safety Transportation Board has done in the last, say, 30 years,
right,
seat belts, three-point restraint systems, collapsible steering wheels, airbags, collision collapse front and back ends, shock absorbing bumpers.
Right. Big improvements.
Big improvements, so that even though the total miles we're driving is probably double what it was 30 years ago, the fatalities are down dramatically.
Right.
Now, that's what a good agency does. It regulates for increased safety and public value.
Right.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulates for the profits of its, quote, members, which are the nuclear companies, who are both the manufacturers of this technology, all non-U.S., by the way. The last U.S. manufacturer was Westinghouse. It's been sold to the Japanese. And even suppliers like General Electric that make a bunch of parts for them won't be doing that in the future. So you're talking about no benefit to American companies by the nuclear industry. Now you get down to the next point, which is, how can you ever stop one of these things? Well, in the case of San Onofre, the way the Academy was able to stop it with our Friends of the Earth and a couple other nonprofits that joined us, we were able to point out that the licensing that had been done for the San Onofre nuclear power plant did not permit the exchange of a heat exchanger that basically vibrated itself into an explosion and shot radioactive particles into the air at massive rates. Then a meltdown, basically.
Right.
And what happened is so much radioactivity shot up the flue at San Onofre that the operators on the board, like China Syndrome, the guy sitting at the control board, pushed the button to stop it, which normally he's not allowed to do that unless it's imminent jeopardy of human life.
Right.
Because you got to call headquarters to get permission to shut these things down, because it takes about a month to wind it back up again. So
right.
They don't like to shut them down. So to shut down instantly, you can imagine how many alarm bells were going off in that place.
Right.
And so over a 2-year plus battle on keeping it closed, and then an additional year, which is still going on, a year and a half, trying to get them a bunch of money back for the public, we gave them a bill for $1.5 billion. They offered to pay $95 million for their damages to the public. We asked for $1.5 billion. A month later, they signed a consent decree for $1.4 billion. And now people are hassling whether the 1.4 is the right number or not. We said, we'll take the 1.4 because the truth is it's closed. And at that point, we'd been working for a couple of years on Diablo Canyon, and we needed to be able, as a small nonprofit, to put all of our firepower on the next nuclear plant we wanted to close.
Right.
So we found out that the nuclear power plant, in the case of Diablo, is required to draw millions and millions of gallons of water out of the ocean every day.
Right.
Sucks it into the plant, uses it for cooling, and then it shoots it back out into the ocean at about 20 degrees hotter than it came in. The significance of that is that the pipe that sucks the water from the ocean to the plant, and this big giant pipe that goes from the plant back to the ocean, have to basically cross and rest on state land.
Okay.
So the State Lands Commission controls that land. So when that plant was originally built, this is a fascinating story. I mean, this is like almost like a thriller, like how you peel these back.
Right.
And what we discovered was that when they built Diablo Canyon and they got the original permit for the intake and the outflow pipes, they did get a permit from the State Lands Commission. And they got it for 40 years.
Okay.
And it matched the 40-year license that PG&E got for the plant itself.
Seems sensible.
Right? Seems so far so good for them.
Right.
Except one thing happened. One oops. They built the plant backwards. Now you laugh. How does one build a nuclear power plant backwards?
It does raise a question.
And these guys did it. And there's no question they did.
Right.
And it took them about 5 or 6 years to build it wrong, tear it down, and rebuild it. We paid for that, by the way. We, the public.
No, we're generous people.
Apparently we're foolish people. Anyway, so they went and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission said, oh, no harm. We'll give you 40 more years from the 6 years they had. Now they got 40 years to go on the license, but only 34 years to go on the pipe permit. Because they forgot to go get the pipe permit renewed.
Right.
When they got the plant renewed. So the plant, the next, less than that, it's more than that, more than 6 years. It's 9 years. Okay. So what happened is these pipes, their permits to operate expired early in 2018.
Okay.
Without that pipe in 2018, there is no nuclear power plant. You can't operate. So if you can shut down that pipe, if the State Lands Commission says, gee, we're not sure if we should let you use this pipe, then all of a sudden it raises into question, how will the plant operate? So we pointed out, because Gavin Newsom is a good friend of mine, and I said, he's lieutenant governor. At the time I approached him as the chairman of the State Lands Commission. I think you ought to look into this, because there was no Environmental Quality Act in California when this plant was licensed.
Right.
So there's never been a CEQA. There's never been an environmental impact report done on this plant. So CEQA stands for California Environmental Quality Act.
Okay.
And when under CEQA, you're supposed to do an EIR, an environmental impact report, on a project like this. So we pointed out there'd never been an EIR. More importantly, we pointed out that if the State Lands Commission wanted to either extend those pipe permits or grant new permits, that would require an environmental impact report.
Right.
And that's not an option. That's a have to.
Right.
And we armed Gavin Newsom with this information. We also approached the State Lands Commission staff.
About when was this happening? Just to give our listeners a bit of a time frame of how long you've been working on this.
Oh, on this particular aspect of it, started in late 2015.
Okay, so that's fairly recent.
Oh, yeah. No, we've been moving pretty quick, actually.
Right.
And everything came to a head, we thought in a good way, when we made a proposal to Gavin. And the proposal was, you want to be thought of as an environmentalist. Okay, here's what you do. Tell PG&E that they're going to have to go through an environmental impact report if they want that permit renewed or they want a new permit.
Right.
And that is a duty you have under state law. And tell them if they want to negotiate an early closure of the plant, we're happy to talk. We could see to it that the financial damage to them could be minimized.
Mm-hmm. A fair trade.
Yeah, I'd be willing to trade lives for money. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So because people are dying every year that operates as a result of its operations. I'll come back to that. So we also pointed out to the staff of the Land Commission and Gavin and his people, look, we did a study in 2014 that shows that this thing is causing elevated cancer risks, and no one has ever refuted that study. They say, oh, it's junk science, but no one's ever refuted it. No one's ever said this footnote's wrong or that footnote's wrong.
Right.
It's quite remarkable. The health officer for San Luis Obispo County has never done a health review of that plant, doesn't want to, and doesn't like the one we did, but doesn't say why, other than two reasons they gave at their first press conference, which they found out later were silly. The one reason they gave was the data wasn't age adjusted, and we say in a footnote the data's age adjusted, so they didn't even read it carefully.
Right. And
the other objection they had is because we took zip codes underneath the plume, and we compared them to zip codes adjacent to the plume. And we said, it looks like the cancer rates are much higher under the plume, which is what you'd expect because that plant off-gasses a highly, highly deadly radioactive isotope called strontium-90.
And this is Diablo you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So all the strontium-90 is coming out of the air, downwind on the plume. It's going to kill people, and it does. So we did a study. Okay. So we said to the State Lands Commission, you need to look at this. Is our study correct? Now, in the meantime, we commissioned a second study, which we just got the preliminary results from literally in July, where we asked, could you focus in on the pediatric issues associated with this plant?
Right.
And specifically, can you chart for us infant mortality? And we went to the number one epidemiologist in the world who does radiation studies. His name's Chris Busby. He's in the United Kingdom. And Chris did a study for us in basically focused in on premature deaths and birth rates. And unfortunately, to our horror, he found that basically at least 8 or 9 kids are going to die if this plant stays open that wouldn't otherwise die. In other words, it's that toxic.
Right. And that's over a time period of
8-9 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so at least 1 kid a year. Okay. And that's only from those causes. It's not from all the other ones. So it's not from the causes that could be associated with other forms of cancer.
Right.
They're just prenatal stuff, right? So when you throw in all the other cancers, then you're talking hundreds of cancers.
Right.
And we also we showed them the records, what happened when Rancho Seco nuclear power plant closed, and the radioactive cancer, the cancer clusters that were generated by that radioactivity dropped precipitously over the next 25 years to the point where today Rancho Seco is now a normal county, whereas before it was at a very elevated cancer risk county. San Luis Obispo is very elevated cancer, even though it's rural, which makes no sense.
The populations around Diablo Canyon have essentially about doubled since they first started building it, which was around 1970 or so. They looked at it from here without really thinking, well, where are we going to be?
Well, and that was certainly true in San
50
Onofre,
years
where
down.
it's, Orange County didn't exist as a dense population base when San Onofre was built, and it's now become this massive megapolis. But let me go back to the story, because it's a fascinating story. So we point all this stuff out, that we've tracked radioactive isotope releases. We've got 2 studies, one at that point we'd already published on cancer clusters generally. The second study about to be released, and we, at the State Lands Commission on July 29th, we actually released the high points of that study when we said, it's going to kill kids, and here's the number. And that's really incredible. And then I said, in front of the State Lands Commission, now, if you don't agree with my data, if you think our data was wrong, the first study was called the Joe Mangano study, the second was the Chris Busby study. If you don't agree with the Mangano study, great, do an environmental impact report and check it. See what your study comes up with. If you don't agree with the Chris Busby, great, that's what an environmental impact report's for. Dig into it, come up with your own conclusions.
Yeah, a good second opinion.
We also gave, and you got to analyze it. The environmental impact report is to decide what's the environmental impact.
Right, exactly.
And here we are, a credible organization in existence since 1986, saying we've paid privately for studies that say this thing's killing people. You have a duty to do an environmental impact to see if it is.
Right.
You can't just blow it off. But they did. We also said we believe that the plant, if it were put here today, could not pass the seismic test and would fail for environmental quality for that reason. Mm-hmm. But hey, maybe we're wrong. Maybe our seismic experts that we brought up from University of California, Santa Cruz, and from elsewhere around the state, maybe they're wrong, these experts. Yeah. Maybe all the seismologists in California who've been saying this to you are wrong. But that's what you would find out if you did an environmental impact report. Don't take my word for it.
Right.
The next thing we talked about, we said, don't take our word for it that the number one source of death to marine life in California is that plant. Because it's destroyed virtually all living creatures within about a mile to shore, a couple of miles.
Like I said, that 20-degree outlet difference in water is bound to have an impact on the ocean.
It does. And the intake is sucking in larvae. Literally billions of fish are getting killed. Okay?
Right.
Now, in fact, we passed a law in California to prevent all power plants located on the coast to do that particular process called once-through cooling. Take it in and put the heated water back. Only 2 plants in California got exceptions to that. One was San Onofre, now closed, and the other is Diablo. Diablo represents 87% of the fish kill in California coast. So that one plant is 87% of the damage that statute was designed to prevent. And we said, if you don't believe us, go do your own. That's what an environmental impact statement's for. And we had one more. We said, in the process of digging into all this, we discovered that you guys have been operating a desalinization plant. And we can't find an environmental impact report on it. Not only are you operating one, you're dumping brine on the ocean floor directly adjacent to the plant, which of course kills everything. It's pure salt.
Right.
And it's just killing. You don't got clams, you got no oysters, you don't have creepy crawly things. You got no, crabs.
Right. This is coming. They pull it out of the water and just drop it right there.
Yeah, they stick the water. They desal the water to desalinize, and then they dump the brine back into the ocean right where they got it from.
Now, is that a separate plant, or is that part of the Diablo process?
Well, it's part of the Diablo process. It's a way that they get clean water for the plant.
Okay.
Now, with all those things on the table, we went to Newsom with this. We said we need to negotiate a closing of this plant because it's absolutely hurting the citizens of the state of California. Mm-hmm. And we proceeded to try and get him. And we thought for a while he was going to do that. And we proposed 4 things that he should do as a state lands commission in conjunction with any extension of that permit or granting the permit. The first thing we said he would have to do to make us happy, and we had the support of Sierra Club, of Friends of the Earth, Mothers for Peace, other organizations.
Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility.
Yeah. All of us came together and said, here's what we want. Number one, we want to make sure that when this plant closes, it's replaced by 100% green energy. Mm-hmm. Number two, we want to make sure that when this plant closes, there's a really generous package for retraining and rehiring of every single employee so the employees don't pay.
Very thoughtful.
Well, and not only that, first time a business and a business group did that for labor. But we said we want every union worker and non-union worker rehired, retrained and rehired at the same or higher level of wages.
Right.
No going backwards because it's not their fault the plant's a piece of junk.
Did that apply to the San Onofre closure as well?
No, and I'll tell you why not, didn't. And then the third thing we wanted was we said that we wanted to have an agreement that the environmental impact report would give us the comfort that continued operation was safe. But we had to have all of those.
Right.
Okay? And there was a fourth thing, I'm trying to remember now, it'll come to me. But basically, we left the conversation. Gavin did his thing behind closed doors with PG&E and with two environmental groups that claimed to represent the rest of us but didn't. Mm-hmm. The fourth thing was they would agree they would never seek another extension of their license from the Regulatory Commission because they were going to get 20 more years.
Right.
So Gavin went off. He thought he was doing great. He got him to agree no extensions, 100% green energy when we close it, good package for labor, but in return, we won't make you do an environmental impact report, meaning they were going to give him the right to operate for 9 more years.
Free and clear.
Free and clear. And I said, no, you don't. No. So we took our team and we went to the State Lands Commission hearing on July 29th. There were two offices. One was in Sacramento where they did it by TV, and the field office was down in San Luis Obispo. And we testified and said, this is crazy. If this thing has any of the issues that we said environmentally, it is your legal duty to find out. And you're trying to duck that duty. And here's what's fascinating. Why are you doing this for PG&E, who at the time I testified on July 29th, had 12 potential felony convictions against it?
Ouch.
For egregiously abusing the public interest and well-being in pursuit of profit when they blew up half of San Bruno. And I said, they're doing the same thing here. In the egregious pursuit of profit, they're playing free and loose with the health and well-being of the citizens of the state of California, and you people, the State Lands Commission, it's your job to not let that happen.
Right.
The commission, Newsom and the other two commissioners, said, well, we got a deal for 3 out of 4 and we're going to go with it. No EIR, no environmental impact report. And they said, staff, tell us if we can do that. Staff said, well, it could be your right to say that you don't have to, but here's what the law says. Okay. And the law says if there are any unreasonable circumstances which could arise, you don't even have to prove unusual circumstances. You have to be able to allege unreasonable circumstances. So we had alleged radiation, we'd alleged seismic, we'd alleged brine on the seafloor, and we'd alleged 20-degree hotter water. All of them represent unusual circumstances, and the big enchilada, of course, is this is the only nuclear power plant in California now, so that's the ultimate unusual circumstance.
Right.
Okay, so there's no way under the Berkeley case, which is a California Supreme Court case from a year and a half ago, you're not allowed to skip the EIR. You got to do it.
Right.
And the state chose to ignore that case, and they chose to issue a permit for two new permits to replace the old, not even extensions, without doing an environmental impact report. We said that's illegal. You can't do that. You don't have the authority to do that. And so we went around to try and get other people to join us. And we had a very difficult time. Well, and I'll tell you why. Pressure was put on this deal like you would not believe to get this plan approved. So we were left with no choice. All by itself, the World Business Academy had to file suit in Los Angeles Superior Court against the state of California, the State Lands Commission, alleging they exceeded their statutory authority. And that's the case that's pending now. And boy, are they trying to beat us up. Listen to this. We knew they were going to be tough, but they don't want the truth. They want to cover this up and move on.
Right.
We asked for and have to have a copy of the transcript of the hearings. They wouldn't give it to us unless we paid $35,000.
How?
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, for a stack of paper, that's quite a fee.
Electrons. It's electrons. It's not even paper.
That's true. It's just a digital electron.
Okay. So that's just a way to try and keep us from going forward.
Right.
Okay, we imagine this suit's going to cost us $100,000 when the smoke clears, but we are going to win because the California Supreme Court's already spoken on our side.
Right.
And when we win, it will force the State Lands Commission to go, okay, now you can't do without an EIR. Go do your EIR. And we believe that when that decision is reached, PG&E will come to the table and negotiate. Now, just let me finish with it.
Okay.
PG&E has now been convicted of 12 felonies, not just alleged.
Oh, okay.
12 felony. And one of the things I raised at the hearing on the 29th is, apart from everything else, it's an unusual circumstance. Isn't it unusual that this is the only convicted felon in the country that's going to get a license to operate a nuclear power plant? How could you have 12 felony convictions and get a license to operate the most dangerous piece of domestic technology the world knows?
Yeah, that's a darn good question.
Darn good question. And I would say it's an unusual circumstance.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that's where we are today. We're in court by ourselves. Now, since we went to court, we were joined by the IHM community. I'm very grateful because IHM stands for the Immaculate Heart of Mary. They were the nuns that the Pope threw out years ago because they wouldn't toe the party line. I think the new Pope probably likes it, but it's called the IHM community now instead of the IHM nuns. But the important thing is if we hadn't filed by August 2nd, guess what happened?
What?
They were waiting to see if we would blink. If we hadn't filed, that would have made the decision irreversible. So we had to file. No choice.
Right.
And they were banking on the fact we wouldn't. Because they figured the cost of that to a small organization.
It's prohibitive, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure somebody assumed, incorrectly apparently, that when we were faced with $100,000 to $200,000 in expense and a small organization, we'd be happy with the fact it's going to close in 9 years. And what they didn't understand, even though we testified about this at great length, we don't think the lives of the people of the state of California can be bought. We don't think you can buy them. If that thing is really creating cancer, and I'm sure it is, and if you don't think so, it's your duty to prove they're not killing people.
Right. You've got numbers to back you up.
I got numbers, I got studies. They got nothing. They just chose to ignore it. They chose to ignore the seismic risk, which everybody agrees on. They chose to ignore the once-through cooling. They chose to ignore the brine dumping on the seabed, and they chose to ignore they're dealing with a convicted felon. All of those are unusual circumstances that we've alleged in the Superior Court in Los Angeles. And we will litigate this all the way to the Supreme Court of America. This is not going to go away.
Right. We're going to take a little break here, folks. We'll be back with our guest, Rinaldo Brutoco of the World Business Academy, and we'll continue our conversation on bringing about the end of nuclear power here in California.